wiggling in my toes. That's just good.
Me too. Okay, you got it. If I don't have it.
Thank you. But also with excitement. I was shivering with excitement because I'm really glad that you guys wanted to engage in both of these conversations about intergenerational faith formation and also this topic of sharing our identity. As a church communicator, identity is such an important part of communications. And a big piece of that is knowing who you are. What is your identity? And other than being, ex-Episcopal church, what does that mean in the world? We are blessed right now with a presiding bishop who I think really gets identity. Everybody has been hearing him talk, right, about the Jesus movement as being one of the core principles of our Episcopal identity. Following Jesus into a loving, liberating, and life-giving relationship with God and with each other through evangelism, racial reconciliation, and environmental stewardship. That's a powerful identity statement about who we are as Episcopalians. Are any of you doing the Good Book Club in this Lent and Easter season, following along with Forward Movement? There was a big push in the Episcopal Church to read through the book of Luke, the Gospel of Luke, and the book of Acts in this Lent and Easter tide as one continuous story and to talk about it. And one of the things that's really struck me in this continuous reading of Acts is how much of Acts is about identity. Figuring out what this new community of Jesus followers is going to look like. In the beginning, of course, it starts out all rosy, right? The identity of these Jesus followers are people who are doing what Jesus did, right? They're feeding the poor. They are sharing everything in common. They are taking care of the widows and the orphans. And what happens? People come, right? They're attracted to that identity of looking like a life that Jesus lived. But pretty soon they start fighting, challenging, but who can really be one of those followers? Do you have to be a Jew first? Can you be something else? Do you have to, look this way or practice exactly this way? And all through Acts, they're kind of working out, maybe no. Maybe all you have to do is follow Jesus. And I think that's what our presiding bishop is getting back to for us. All of the other things fall away if our identity is living a life that Jesus lived. Loving people, freeing them from the things that are oppressing them, and bringing people back to new life. So if we start there with our identity, we're in a good place. And this morning I'm going to just talk a little bit about how we figure out who we are as a community, because in that Jesus movement, every single church has a different way of living that out. And you have something that you're giving your community that nobody else is doing. So how do you articulate that as your identity? How is your particular branch functioning in the world? So we'll talk about how you evaluate what that is, looking at who is in your community. Are there people that you want to be reaching out to that you're not reaching out to? It's where we'll get into a little bit of where we left off with Melissa. And we'll talk about brand. It's not a word we often use in association with the church, but it's important. Like if we are going to be Pentecost preachers, we are going to be needing to speak the language of our culture too, and take the best things that our culture can teach us about how to reach people where they are. So we're going to talk about brand and some best practices in getting that brand out into your community. And then I'll give you a little bit of resources and we'll go much deeper this afternoon. So what is it that people are already saying about your church? There's a lot about your identity that you don't have any control over, right? A lot of identity is formed by what people think they know about you, what they actually know about you. One of the best ways to get at this, I found, is to ask people in your church to go out and ask 10 people each that have no connection with your church, what do they know about Good Shepherd Church? What do they know about St. Mark's? And gather all those answers together. You know, you might hear, I thought they closed, you know, I don't see any cars there during the week, or thought they were the, you know, that they're the rich church, or the white church, or the whatever. But you need to know what people already have in their head about who your identity is. You may get people who are like, I don't even know there was a church there. That almost might be better, right, than starting to counter negative identity perceptions of your church. Because then you have nothing but to do but to build something, right? So, but find out what that identity already is in your community and start there. Probably all of you have a mission statement or a vision statement, right? I don't know, can anybody name what theirs is? Or know who belongs to the We Are a Caring, Growing Christian Family? Because one of the 3 churches in this room belongs to that one.
That's not us.
St. Mark's.
St. Mark's. Yep.
That's familiar.
Question mark. Okay. Yep, that's St. Mark's. What about the little church with a mighty mission? Who's that? Good Shepherd, right? So sometimes the frame for your identity is captured at least a little bit in that mission statement or that tagline. Sometimes we run away from that though, right? Or we've drifted from whatever that mission statement is because it was crafted 20 years ago and it sounded good and it stayed on our website ever since we had a website, so surely that's who we are. But it may not be. But it's a good place to start and see if what you are saying you are is who you are today. All of these pieces of evaluation are important to do too, because this is how you exist out in the world already. If you have a website, looking seriously at getting people who've never looked at your website before to do it with you is a great way to do this. Ask them at a first glance, what does the website tell you about who we are? What assumptions can you make from the pictures that are on there? From the way it's laid out, from the colors that are chosen. What are your assumptions about our identity based on that website? And looking at, if you haven't already, looking at who's looking at your website. My father would say this is the scariest part of all of our digital world, that we can look at who's looking at our website, right? We can tell something about their demographics, we can tell their region, we can tell how long they're spending on any of our different pages. But that's important information. If people are landing on your front page and they're never going anywhere else, you've clearly not drawn them in any further. So all good information to start with. Where are you right now? Social media, if you have a Facebook page or a Twitter account or anything, whatever your social media presence, if you have one, what is that saying about you? What are the pictures that are getting posted on there? Even if you don't have a social media presence, I guarantee you exist on social media. If people have checked into your church, whether you have a Facebook page or not. So what is the presence that's out there that you're not even creating? And then if you're doing advertising, doing some evaluation about who that's reaching and who you want it to reach and what it's costing you. So I always encourage churches to start with evaluation of who they are first. But then taking a look at demographics of your area, and here's where the data really, really can help you. And the Episcopal Church has done an amazing thing for us by providing for every Episcopal church the demographics of their area. How many of you have looked at the Episcopal Church's report on your area? Deb has? Okay. It is a fantastic tool, so I'll have the link at the bottom, but you can Google Episcopal research and get to it. They have done, for a 5-mile radius around your church, all this work for you. They tell you who is in your community, what their income level is, what are the trends, how do those trends compare to the whole state? And so I just picked Webster City since this is our host, so we can get an idea of who Webster City is right now. The population of Webster City is declining, and declining faster than some of the other cities in the state, right? Important to know. It is not all white. It is 7% Hispanic or Latino, 3% Asian, 1% other, and less than 1% Black. Historically, that might be important to do some research into figuring out why those numbers are so low. What is it that's keeping this from being a more multicultural city? The average age continues to rise. Part of that is because kids aren't staying. Kids are graduating college and leaving. These are all things you probably know. Kids under 17 are decreasing as a percentage of the population, and over 55 increasing. You have more retirees here than you do children replacing them. Children are aging through the school system and not being replaced. The average income per household is trending up, though, which is in contrast to some of the other cities. So it might be that you have some more people with more disposable income moving into your area. Single-parent households are increasing, and married households are decreasing. And so what might the implication for your ministry be? There's a lot of single parents in your area that are going to need some of the support that Melissa was talking about. Is that a mission field for you? It's hard enough raising a kid with a two-parent household, because I kept saying to my husband, like, this is a team sport, absolutely. And we didn't want to have any more kids than we had hands for. We were individual, we were out in public, right? We could only handle 2 kids, man on man, right? One-on-one defense. And any more than that, and we would have been out of our depth. But imagine being the only parent in a household, and what a gift a community would be that could support you in being a single parent. And divorce is more prevalent in Webster City than in the state average. And is that an area of ministry too? Both grieving from whatever loss of relationship had been, but support for people who are divorced. What kind of community do they need to be a family? So Episcopal Church research, just Google that and you'll be able to find for every church in the entire country what your congregation and community look like. So what is your brand? We often equate brand with a logo, and those are not the same thing. A logo is a piece of your visual identity. It's a piece of your brand, and it should match your brand, but it's not the same thing. So your brand includes everything. What you do, what are the ministries of your church? So I have churches often start by naming all of the things that they do, all of the people that they serve. What are the different ministries of the church? But also, how are you different than the other groups in the area? You might not be the only church in this town, I'm guessing. How is your church doing things differently than the church down the street? What are the things that you can name that set you apart from those other churches? Who are you serving? What would happen if you closed tomorrow? Who would notice? Who would be the first people that say, oh, I really relied on that church for what? If the answer is no one, you have some bigger things to deal with too, right? About why your community is vital to that location. How do we see ourselves? One of the ways to get at this is to do some appreciation, community appreciation. What are the things that you really value about being a member of this church? Because something has kept you here. Something drew you here. What are those things? What keeps you here week after week, month after month? What makes it a place that you want to bring other people to? Start with those appreciations. And then bring in what other people are saying about you. Does that match who you think you are? Does that match what other people think about you? The biggest thing in how you represent your visual identity to the world is to be authentic. Be who you are. Don't pretend to be things you're not, even if it's who you want to be in the future. right? You're not a huge church, and if that's not never who you're going to be, don't pretend to be that online or in your materials. If you are the church that just loves to gather around and knit together, be that. Be a community that is authentic, and people will come. The hardest, and that's a hard thing for people to grasp, right? They want to be the church that welcomes everybody. That we are going to be, and as I'm trying to get people to craft, who really are you targeting? Who are you wanting to bring in that isn't here? We want to welcome everyone. Yes, and you're not going to be the church probably that feels really welcoming to somebody who's looking for a praise band and screens and right, you're not going to be that for them. So how do you be the best at what God is calling you to be in this particular context? With the gifts that you have been given that are gathered in this church, be the best at that and be consistent and recognizable at that. That gets back to those early disciples in Acts, right? That people were drawn to that authentic representation of what they believed being a Jesus follower was. And so when we're talking about identity, there's a lot of talk about identity politics, right, in our area, in our political arena right now, and a lot of very carefully drawn boundaries around identity, who is in and who is out in our country, right? This is not the kind of identity boundaries that I'm talking about. It isn't, as they get into later in Acts about who's really part of this movement and who's not. It's about how do we authentically say who we are and whose we are and live that out in the way we've been called to do it right here, right? And people will come. So one of the helpful ways to do consistency about your identity is to come up with even a simple visual identity guide, so that when you are representing your church to the outside world, it looks the same whether they are looking at it on a device, if they're looking at it on a printed ad. And that does require some consistency, and it's something that the Episcopal Church within the last 5 years is really coming to understand and do well, and we do well to follow them. So that includes everything from the logo that you use, but even the fonts that you choose. Are they inviting? Are they readable? Are they hard lines and stiff and hard to read? Using contrast, having a lot of space around things so that things pop out that you want to emphasize and that they're comfortable to direct the eye to. From the color palette you choose to the photography that you choose to show on your social media and on your website. How you tell your story, what language that you use, and here those details matter. People notice what pronouns you're using, what are you using insider language that I don't even know. I'm supposed to meet you in the narthex. I have no idea what that means. That's where language is really important. Is your language inviting and clear to people who, especially those folks that have no religious affiliation and aren't going to have the language that we do? So the Episcopal Church actually has come out with a visual identity guide, which is really helpful and can be downloaded if you just search Episcopal Identity Guide. This will come up as a PDF. It'll give you everything you need to know about using the Episcopal Church's logo and why they've made the choices that they have. It will give you everything from the fonts that are used by the Episcopal Church. And if you use those fonts, every time you use a piece of that, you're tying yourself to the bigger Episcopal Church brand. Suggestions on how you use contrast and how you use that negative space. But there's a whole font family that would tie you into the Episcopal Church. The color palette is something they've really worked on in these last 5 years. The main colors, of course, are their shield. And in this afternoon session, we'll talk about color and why picking colors for everything from your logo to your website is really important, and what those colors do to us psychologically. Lots and lots of good research that advertisers have done for us about why those things speak to us in a particular way. And then the secondary color palette, right, that does draw from the original, but also highlights the individual things, different ministries that folks are involved with. Guidelines for the use of photographs, what makes for good and compelling photographs, especially with the way some of the social media things are changing. Photographs are such an important part of storytelling. That is what draws you in, gets your attention, and they're more likely to stop on a photograph that is telling a story, that is engaging, right? So there are guides on how to do that. This church, Good Samaritan in Indiana, is a church that I think gets this sort of identity branding in a really, really good way, and they have from their very beginning. They are a church that has no walls. They meet in a school 2 Sundays a month. 2 Sundays a month they meet out in the community. As a church, they go and serve some different place in their community. And then the other Sundays, one of those other Sundays, they reflect on that, and the other Sunday they do Bible study and formation, but all rooted in service, right? They became known, they realized in their area as the church that serves. So they capitalized on that. That is their actual domain name, churchthatserves.org. I don't know if you can read their tagline is followers of Jesus with open minds and hearts to serve. Followers of Jesus with open minds and hearts to serve. Good Samaritan Episcopal Church is a growing community of open-minded Christians who seek to do what Jesus taught, to include, love, and serve all people without exception. We are a new church without walls, and we meet in places where we can serve and be with our neighbors. We seek to build a diverse fellowship, and we welcome all who want to ask deep questions and put faith into action. Right? Sentence form of really that first tagline: followers of Jesus with open minds and hearts to serve. The churchthatserves.org. This is their huge board that they have put up along the highway. All of that's all the text, all the pictures, everything on that absolutely reflects what they say they are, right? We're a church with open minds. Clearly, we've got lots of different kind of families there. Church that serves. We are a church that serves. And Jesus, we follow Jesus. Jesus welcomes you here no matter what. Their identity is crystal clear just from that. These are some of the things that they hand out. So the first two are every parishioner gets a stack of business cards. That's the front and the back of their business cards. All of their colors and everything that they do come from that color palette that's on the left. So it's easy to see them out in public when they're in their t-shirts, when their ads are in the magazines. The one on the right is a little magazine ad that they put in their local magazine that comes out, I think, quarterly. But it is easy to see, just like the McDonald's logo is easy. You know what those little golden arches mean when you see them. People are starting to get, when they see that, the G and the S, that logo means those things. Followers of Jesus with open minds and hearts to serve. That's identity branding. So how do you get that identity out into the community? Once you've figured out what that is and how you want to be in the world, you absolutely must have a website these days. There's no getting around it. You must spend money on it. If, at the very least, and it's not expensive anymore the way it used to be. You don't have to be a web designer. You don't have to pay somebody hundreds of dollars a month anymore. There are companies who have done that work for you that make really clean looking designs that all you have to do is plug in your information and choose some pictures. So it doesn't cost as much as it did anymore, or as it used to. But they absolutely must be responsive. And that means that no matter what device people are looking at it on, whether it's a tiny little phone, whether it's a tablet or a computer, it must adapt without the person having to hold their phone up to here, which is what I do with my glasses, right? And squeeze and pinch to get it readable. It must be easy to read on all the devices. It needs to be visitor focused. We used to treat websites as the go-to place to send our members, find this information on the website. We'll post this on the website. That isn't the thinking anymore. You really do need to have your website as that front door that people see out in the world that tell them exactly what they need to know. It needs to be easy to find. What time is your worship service? Lots of pictures that say, oh, yeah, I could bring my family here. I can picture my husband and I can picture myself as a single person. I can picture myself in this community. So lots of pictures. Easy to navigate and have content that does change from time to time. But there's also ways you can automate that so you are not having to go in there weekly and change the content. You can schedule those things so that you can let it be for a while. And it doesn't need to be expensive or difficult to maintain anymore. At the very least, now the Episcopal Church is providing, through the asset map, they're providing ways to do that that I'll talk about this afternoon. So even if you can't afford a website and you really think you can't do this, there's at least an Episcopal Church site for every single church in the diocese that you can tap into and get your information on. So we'll talk about that this afternoon. And we'll go through this afternoon in more detail all about social media. What are the best practices on social media to get your word out? Because we have to be there. That is where the people are. As we were talking about this morning, our kids are looking at their devices. 2 billion people are on Facebook every year. 1 billion on YouTube. 800 million on Instagram. 317 million on Twitter. These are the figures from 2018. This is where the people are. So how do we get our identity there? These are the top 5 that I recommend for churches. You don't have to do all of them. It's a little bit about why each of them, what each of them are good for. But Facebook is a pretty standard, good for everything kind of audience builder, and for building relationships. Twitter is not usually necessary for churches unless you're doing things that are newsworthy, right? Because that's where those conversations are happening. Instagram, especially Instagram and Pinterest both. If you are a church that wants to be someplace people come for weddings, or you have something on your grounds that you want to draw people to, it's a great way with pictures to show people why coming to your church would be a good thing. But it is an incredible evangelism tool. Am I getting close to time, I bet? Yeah, okay. So this afternoon, those of you who want to join me, we'll talk about ways to use social media in getting your brand out in the world. But it doesn't all have to be, here's somebody checked in at our church when we were doing pet blessing. It doesn't have to be driven by anybody professional, right? All of your members can be encouraged to do things like check in at church when they're here, talk about what's going on, and they can all be turned into evangelists. We'll talk this afternoon some more about other ways to do it that aren't digital. Ways to get your brand out there with t-shirts, by partnering with people in your community that you share gospel values with, that you get on their t-shirt for their event because it's somebody that you want to be associated with, that you want your church to be a part of whatever good work that they're doing. All right, and there's a lot of good resources on Iowa Share under communications for all of the